Hello everybody and welcome back to Infinite IoT. Really excited to have an individual in studio that's on the forefront of robotics. I have with me Brian Reinhart. He's the VP of Sales, Marketing, and Solutions with Robotics. Going to talk to Brian today about just really the pillars of a high-functioning manufacturing warehouse solution. Brian, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me, Matt. Looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tell me a little bit of how everything's going over at High.
I mean, much like anyone in the warehousing, logistics, manufacturing space, it's as busy as all can be these days. People want goods faster, cheaper, easier, which has created, just undue stress on the supply chain and the warehousing industry. So, what they're turning to is new creative solutions. And for those of us in the robotics space, a lot of people are landing on us. So it's a really exciting time to be in the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't wait to see how you guys mature as you go along. But for today's conversation, let's start off with the three pillars of that high functioning manufacturing warehouse solution. We talked previously about the fact that it was speed, you had flexibility, and you had density. When we talk about speed within a solution, what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned three pillars. If we were having this conversation in 1995 or 2000, it would be one pillar, speed. And so I think that's the greatest point to start because it's the first thing people want to learn when they talk about warehousing, automation, distribution. And what I mean by speed is how quickly can we get products from point A to point B to point C within the warehouse. And if we just take kind of your typical warehousing environment, you're getting bulk inventory in, either from a manufacturer, a production facility, a vendor of some sort, and then you're storing it on a rack or in a tote or something like that. And then you're getting it out the door to fulfill an order that someone may be paid for on Amazon or Walmart. And from those simple operations, what we need to figure out how we can do is get from A to B to C quicker. And so if you think of the most simplistic environment inside of a warehouse, you've got an operator maybe driving on a fork truck, maybe walking around with a push cart. They can do so many moves, so many product handling activities per hour. And the human being is going to be limited by their own speed, their endurance, their ability to work. With automation, we remove those limitations. Machines are faster, they're stronger, and they're more reliable than the human being. And so when you talk speed, from an automation perspective, you're able to now move those products from point A to point B 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 times faster than you otherwise could. And what that allows you to do is take that labor force and really repurpose and reposition them to be true value add inside the warehouse while also minimizing your investment in that labor and those OpEx activities.
So utilizing that technique, I mean, how does that impact real estate spend and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get faster, you're able to get more production out of one facility. You're able to get more efficient, and efficiency reduces spend in a bunch of different ways. It can reduce it in labor. It can also reduce it in real estate. If you were only able to get 100,000 orders out of the door with a manual environment, but you need to do 500,000 for your network, well, you need 5 DCs. But if we automate and now we can increase that speed and get 5x that production, you can do that now from one DC and really save yourself a fortune in networking and real estate costs.
So let's talk about the picks per hour concept that feeds into that.
Yeah, picks is really the most common function in a warehouse. And the reason is the put side of it, you can put a bunch of items into a location at once. And so you're going to get 10 to 20 efficiencies on a put compared to a pick. So that's why warehousing speed is mostly focused on picking because you're usually picking one item. And so an operator walking around with a push cart can maybe do 50, 60 picks per hour. They got a little scan gun, something telling them where to go. It gets a little faster. When you're getting into advanced automation and advanced robotics, you're able to get picks per hour in the 3, 4, 5, 600 per hour metrics. And so that's where you'll see those 5 to 10x efficiency gains in terms of speed.
When you start to think about the efficiency that's created through that, it's no wonder that, companies like yours and your competitors are moving as quickly as possible to be at the forefront of that.
Yeah, and I mean, speed is one of the easier problems to solve, right?
Yep.
It's a mechanical engineering problem that's been solved, like I said, for decades now. And so really, when it comes to speed, what companies like mine and the industry are doing is trying to just improve on the margins. How do we go from 500 picks an hour to 600 picks an hour? Because every percentage you gain, rolled out across an entire network can be very substantial savings for the end user.
Another element to that, and we'll pivot, is over to that density piece. I've seen so many amazing setups with how you engage with the density issue within the real estate that you're paying for, right, as an entity. So talk to me a little bit how the density approach to density within a warehouse has changed.
Oh yeah. So I mentioned if we were talking in 95 or 2000 speed, they added the second pillar, density, really kind of the mid 2000s, about 10 to 15 years ago. And it was, okay, we've solved speed, but man, this automation is still taking up a lot of space. We still need large footprint real estate. We still need big, million square foot box warehouses. How do we get more compact, more dense to save that space? And so you saw an evolution in the technology. We couldn't sacrifice speed, but we just had to evolve it into a more dense platform. And so, that came with utilizing vertical space. A lot of traditional technologies, specifically the manual ones, are limited by a human being's height. By automating to the top of the ceiling, we no longer have a bunch of wasted vertical space. By storing in a compact, dense fashion and using robots, we're able to eliminate drive aisles, which again, when you're looking at, just think of a fork truck putting pallets to and from an aisle, that's 50% air that we're storing in those drive aisles. If you put all those pallets together and let robots pick from the top, bottom, or outside, then again, we're getting a much more dense solution. The key, like I said, is kind of combining those two elements together and getting that cross-section of the Venn diagram so that we're hitting our speed requirements, but doing it in the smallest footprint possible.
So I just think about my time in warehouses over the last several years, and it went from seeing the standard worker toting around, taking the time, grabbing stuff. Then I started to see the robots that were cruising around in those aisles. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very interesting to me to really wrap my head around the fact that we're now going to pick from all angles to create those efficiencies. So It's amazing.
Absolutely. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily even mean the full elimination of some aisles, but maybe we're shrinking them, right? So a very narrow aisle concept. Maybe we're still picking in an aisle, but we're picking 1, 2, 3, 4 deep, so that now our storage to aisle efficiency isn't 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, it's 6-to-1 or 8-to-1. And so again, much like with speed, by really making those margins that much more efficient, we're creating that much greater savings.
Absolutely. And that takes us to, we've covered two of those pillars, right? The speed and the density, and then we get to flexibility. And flexibility to me is somewhat, ambiguous, right? Yeah. So talk to me about what flexibility means in this space.
Yeah, it's interesting being on kind of the salesy side of the business, right? When you sell or talk about speed or density, it's very black and white. Here's the rates we get, here's the footprints. Flexibility is a bit more subjective, a bit more conceptual, and it comes in a number of different shapes and forms. The few that we can talk about, one is how quick and easy is it to integrate this equipment? What if something changes and we have to pivot to where we have to scale up or scale down? What if we need to expand our business in the future? If seasonality causes massive spikes in our order volume or our profiles change, how will the automation adapt? And so what we're now doing is taking that speed, taking that density, and adding the third part of that Venn diagram, flexibility, to ensure that not only are we getting orders out the door as quick as possible with the minimal footprint, but we're designing all of these different contingencies and unknowns into the technology so that it can real-time adapt on the fly to handle them.
You talked about some of the efficiencies that are created through that process. As far as the more traditional approach to that flexibility, what did it once look like in comparison to what it's doing now for you?
Yeah, I'll use a really good example from my world, right? the mobile robotics world. Before flexibility became a primary consideration, during Black Friday, what most companies would do is you'd take an operation that was normally single or 2 shift and you'd go 3 shift, and you'd bring in every operator that you could find in the city and you'd pay them double rates to work around the clock. And that's how you got through Black Friday. Well, to now, you can rent or lease additional robots to carry that extra volume spike. You don't have to purchase them, so you're not, as they say, building the church for Easter Sunday. We're simply building for our everyday operation, but then we're going to flexibility, the extra equipment needed. So that's how it kind of looks today from how it used to look. And there's other more modern examples of flexibility too when you talk about, how do we purchase the equipment, whether it's robotics as a service versus traditional CapEx expense, leasing, renting. Again, those options just give the buyer more control over their operation.
And what about the AVG and the AMR models that are incorporated into that? Can we dig into that a bit?
Yeah, I think, that's where the blend is becoming really interesting, because AGVs and AMRs, by their very nature, are a very flexible technology. You can pick them up and move them from one site to another. They don't require any on-site construction or erection. You just uncrate them and configure them and go. And so when you take the flexibility of the AGV and the AMR and put it with the speed of something like a shuttle system, with the storage density of a grid-based system, that's where, those combinations and these modern technologies can really kind of hit all elements and bring those advantages to the customer.
So as we take into consideration that entire pie, right? We talked Venn diagram, all these 3 elements contributing to ultimately this solution that we're stating is going to be the most efficient way to utilize your square footage and use the technology to your benefit as a business. Where do you see that approach evolving, even from where we're at today?
Yeah, I mean, if I were able to predict it, I'd have my own podcast and I would charge people for it, right?
Fair enough.
An educated guess, I would say, is the intelligence of the equipment. And so modern automation is getting smarter by the day, but it's still lagging behind several other industries. So if you were to take something like the business intelligence algorithms or even artificial intelligence from different industries like the medical or the manufacturing space and apply them to the technology within the warehouse, it's only going to make that tech that much stronger. And so now when I talked about, the ability to adapt and react on the fly, there's still a large human element to that within the warehouse. You're telling the automation, no, do this, change this. What we want to get to a point is where the automation can tell itself, recognize the problem on the fly, and make the adjustment accordingly. So again, I think, that could be the 4th pillar that we see in the next decade is, are we still fast? Are we dense? Are we flexible? And how smart are we? I think that's one that you could see. The other one, I think, is really, how micro can we get? So again, the warehousing space has always kind of lived in the warehouse, but as supply chain evolution has grown, as buyer behaviors have evolved, what you're seeing now is a more distributed warehousing network of smaller footprints. And so now we need to take everything I just said, but shrink it. And so can we fit it into a metro area, into the back of a retail outlet, or just into a 10,000 square foot space? And so that kind of evolution would be pretty interesting to see as well.
I just think about the impact on, we've just gotten through a couple of years where supply chain got thrown all out of whack. Oh, yeah. It's at the top of everybody's mind. We have these solutions that are out there. Hi Robotics is at the forefront of helping to create a better world in that scenario so that we can manage it more efficiently. And I'm just excited about where you as a company are taking the business. So if we close out with something that is near and dear to your heart, what are you most excited about for Hi Robotics as we take this thing into the next steps?
It really is that introduction of the 3rd pillar. Traditional warehousing automation, a lot of the competition, that would be for Hi Robotics out there is just so strong when it comes to certain areas of the warehouse. But the ability to blend those 3 pillars together, I think the Hi Robotics technology and the way we built the company around it, that's where we're headed for. And so, introducing the market to a flexible automation platform is really exciting to me. I like to say the phrase, are you working for your automation or is your automation working for you? And it's a thought that really opens a lot of eyes because people think, oh, it's working for me. Well, is it? Because you still have to feed it a lot of information. And when your stuff spikes, you feel a lot of pain. We saw that pain throughout, COVID. If you don't have labor, what are you going to do? High robotics can be the answer to a lot of those questions.
I love it. I really appreciate your
Thank you.
thought leadership here and your time. Thanks for visiting the studio here in Dallas. We'll look forward to great things.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you for your time.
Yep. Thanks for joining another episode of Infinite IoT. For more information on high robotics, visit HAIrobotics.com, and you can find this and every other Infinite IoT episode at the home of B2B, marketscale.com. We'll see you next time.